Have you ever felt underestimated? Judged by the outside, never given a chance to show who you really are? Well, for Emily Dawson, this was her everyday life, until one day, everything changed. But before we dive in, let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments below. It was just another typical morning for Emily Dawson. The sun was still rising, and the world was waking up to a new day. Emily, in her 30s, was ready to face whatever the day had in store for her. But to everyone who passed by her, she was just another woman. You might think nothing special stood out about her. You'd probably think she was just another person, walking down the street like everyone else. She had dark sunglasses on, covering her eyes, and a white cane in her hand. The cane tapped the ground softly with each step she took. It was her guide, her helper, just like Max the dog walking next to her. Every tap of the cane meant Emily was staying on the path, walking straight down the sidewalk, not letting anything stop her. But what people didn't know as they saw her was this: Emily wasn't just walking like any other person. Emily was blind. Yes, she couldn't see anything. Not the bright morning sun, not the cars zipping past her, not the people walking by, not even the beautiful flowers blooming in the park. But Emily had learned to live in a world without sight. She didn't let it stop her. She had figured out ways to do things that most people take for granted. She was strong in ways that most people would never understand. And her guide dog, Max, was with her. Max was a big, fluffy golden retriever. He wasn't just a cute dog who liked to play fetch. No, Max had a special job. He helped Emily stay safe when she walked. He kept her from bumping into things and helped her cross busy streets. But most of all, Max made sure Emily didn't feel alone in the world. He was her friend, her protector, and the most loyal companion she could ask for. As Emily walked through the busy streets that morning, people didn't look at her the way they looked at everyone else. They didn't see her as a person, they only saw the fact that she was blind. They thought that just because she couldn't see, she wasn't capable of much. They didn't know that underneath her calm and quiet appearance, Emily was so much more than what they saw. They didn't know that she was strong, smart, and determined. But one thing was clear: Emily had a secret, and this secret would soon change everything. Emily wasn't just an ordinary woman. She was about to show the world that the way people saw her wasn't the truth. They couldn't see the power she had inside her, the strength that had been built over years of challenges and hard work. And as she walked down that street, something was about to happen that would finally make people realize that they had no idea who she really was. The wind blew softly, and Max's tail wagged, his ears perked up, sensing something in the air. Emily didn't need to ask what was going on, she trusted Max. If he sensed danger or trouble, she would listen to him. You see, Emily wasn't the type to show fear or give up. No, she had a quiet confidence. She didn't need to yell or draw attention to herself to prove her worth. She knew exactly what she was capable of, and she had a strength inside that was deeper than most could ever understand. But no one knew that yet. As Emily and Max kept walking, there was a group of bikers up ahead. They were loud, with their motorcycles roaring, zooming down the road like they owned the place. They didn't care about the people around them. They thought they were bigger, stronger, and more important than anyone else. They were too busy showing off, racing through the streets with no thought to others. Emily could hear them long before they reached her. The engines of the motorcycles were so loud, it made the ground shake. She could feel the vibrations through her cane, and it made her stop for a second. Max, standing by her side, was still as a statue, his ears listening, waiting for the moment to react. "Watch out," one of the bikers shouted. Emily didn't flinch. She had heard these kinds of taunts before. "Hey, lady, what's with the dog? Is it gonna bite me if I get too close?" one of the bikers yelled, laughing with his friends. They weren't just being loud. They were making fun of her. They thought that because she couldn't see, she was an easy target. They thought they could mess with her, have some fun at her expense. They didn't know her, though. They didn't know anything about her life or how she lived it. They didn't know that Emily had spent years learning how to stand tall and keep going, even when things got hard. But Max, her dog, knew. Max had a different story to tell. Emily kept walking, her cane tapping, step by step. She didn't let the bikers' rude comments make her lose her focus. She didn't stop because of their harsh words. She didn't turn around or try to defend herself. She knew that wasn't the way to handle things. Max wasn't just her guide dog. Max was trained for something much bigger. You see, Max wasn't a regular dog. He wasn't just there to help Emily get around. Max had been through tough training, the kind of training most people couldn't even imagine. Max had served as a Navy SEAL K9, a military working dog who had protected soldiers and helped them in dangerous situations. He had faced more danger than most people ever would, and he had never backed down from a challenge. But the bikers didn't know any of this. They only saw a big dog, walking quietly by Emily's side. They saw her as weak. They saw her as an easy target. They didn't know the power Max held behind his calm, friendly eyes. And they certainly didn't know that Max was ready to protect Emily at any moment. He wasn't just a dog, he was a trained warrior. But that day, everything was about to change. As Emily walked past the bikers, they revved their engines one last time, circling her and making loud jokes. But this time, something was different. Something changed in the air. Max was alert. His body tensed, and his eyes locked onto the group of bikers, like a lion watching its prey. Emily didn't need to say a word. She trusted Max. She knew he would protect her when it was needed most. The bikers didn't know it yet, but they had made a huge mistake. They had messed with the wrong woman, and they were about to find out just how powerful she and Max really were. Now, imagine being Emily. The world sees you, and all they see is weakness. They don't see the strong woman inside, they don't see the fighter who has been through so much. All they see is a woman with dark sunglasses and a cane, walking slowly down the street. People don't know that she's a survivor, someone who has lived through many tough situations. They look at her and think she needs help. They think she's someone to pity, someone who can't do things on her own. And that's exactly how the bikers saw her too. When they spotted Emily walking with her guide dog, Max, a golden retriever, they thought she was just an easy target. The group of bikers was loud and rough. They revved their big motorcycle engines, making the sound of roaring thunder. The noise echoed through the street, shaking the windows and rattling the trees. The smell of gasoline filled the air as they sped around, not caring about anyone else. They were big and strong, and they thought they could do whatever they wanted. But they didn't know anything about Emily, or Max. To them, Max was just a dog, a cute dog, yes, but a dog all the same. They didn't realize that Max had a past much bigger than any of them could imagine. They didn't know that he wasn't just a guide dog. Max had served as a Navy SEAL K9, a warrior who had been trained to protect soldiers in dangerous situations. He had faced real danger, and he had been a hero. But to the bikers, he was just another dog on a leash. As Emily walked down the sidewalk, the bikers noticed her and laughed. They saw her with Max and thought they could make fun of her. They thought she wouldn't say anything back. After all, she was blind, right? She couldn't even see them laughing at her. They thought they could get away with it. One of the bikers, a tall man with a scruffy beard, was the first to speak up. He revved his engine and pointed at Emily. "What's she doing out here, huh? Think she's special because she's got a fancy dog?" he mocked. His friends laughed, their loud voices booming in the air. They were clearly enjoying the sight of a woman who couldn't defend herself, a woman who they thought was weak. Emily heard them. She could hear every word. Her heart started to race, but she didn't show it. She stood tall, even though she couldn't see the bikers or their faces. She knew she had to stay calm. This was a moment she had faced before. People had underestimated her whole life. They thought she couldn't do things, thought she was helpless. But Emily had learned that she was anything but helpless. Emily didn't flinch. She didn't move a muscle. She kept walking, one step at a time, keeping her cool. She trusted Max to lead her and keep her safe. She didn't need to prove anything to these bikers. She didn't need to shout or fight back. But Max? Max wasn't going to let it go. Max had heard the taunts, the mean words, the way the bikers laughed at his best friend, his person. He didn't like it, not one bit. Max had been through so much already. He had been trained to protect people, to keep them safe. And Emily? She was his responsibility. As the bikers circled around Emily, their motorcycles revving louder and louder, Max's ears perked up. His tail, usually relaxed, became stiff. He was on high alert. Max knew that something wasn't right. He had been trained to sense danger. He had been trained to protect. And right now, he could feel the threat in the air. One of the bikers came too close to Emily, swerving dangerously around her and making her stumble a little. The roar of the motorcycle filled her ears, and she could feel the breeze of the speeding bike brushing against her face. Max didn't like it. Not at all. The bikers' friends laughed louder, enjoying the show. They thought they were tough, showing off in front of a woman they thought was too weak to fight back. "What's the matter, lady? You don't like a little fun," the biker said, revving his engine even more, making the ground shake beneath Emily's feet. Emily felt her heart pound in her chest. The bikers were getting closer, and she could tell they weren't done making fun of her. She kept her head high, trying to ignore the cruel words. But in the back of her mind, she knew that Max wouldn't let this go. She could feel him getting more tense with every moment that passed. Max's muscles were tight. His whole body was ready. Max had been in scary situations before, and he knew how to handle them. But this time, it wasn't the military he was facing. It wasn't an enemy he was trained to fight. This time, it was just a group of bikers who thought they could bully someone who couldn't see them. Max wasn't just a dog. Max was a fighter. As Emily took another step forward, one of the bikers, his face twisted into a mean grin, made a rude gesture. He pushed his bike even closer to her, almost knocking her off balance. The wind from the motorcycle's engine made her hair fly around, but she didn't move. She stayed steady as a rock. But Max? Max wasn't having it. He wasn't going to let this slide anymore. The biker was too close, and he was too dangerous. Max growled a deep, rumbling growl that sent a chill down Emily's spine. It was the kind of growl that meant business. It was the kind of growl that told the bikers they were messing with the wrong dog. The biker didn't know what he had just triggered. He didn't know that Max was more than just a guide dog. He didn't know about Max's past. He didn't know about the Navy SEAL missions, the combat training, the hours of work he had put in to become a protector. Max wasn't scared. He wasn't intimidated. He had faced bigger, scarier things than this biker on a motorcycle. Max was ready to act. Emily could feel Max's energy shift. She could feel his muscles tense, his eyes locked on the bikers. She didn't know exactly what was happening, but she trusted him. She knew Max would protect her. For the first time that day, the bikers stopped laughing. They paused, looking at each other. They felt the change in the air. They could sense that something was different. Max wasn't like any dog they had seen before. The biker who had been closest to Emily took a step back, surprised by the growl he had heard. He didn't know what to do. He thought dogs were just pets, friendly and harmless. But this was no regular dog. Max's training was telling him that it was time to defend, and he was ready to do just that. Emily didn't need to say a word. She didn't need to tell Max to do anything. Max already knew what to do. And right then, he was ready to show these bikers just how serious he could be. They might have seen her as weak, but they were about to find out that she was anything but. Max stepped forward, his body tense and alert. He moved closer to the biker on the motorcycle, and his growl grew louder. He wasn't going to let the biker get any closer to Emily. He was protecting her, and nothing was going to stop him. The bikers were confused. They had thought they could mess with a blind woman and her dog, but now they saw a different side of Max. The once confident and loud group of bikers was suddenly silent. They didn't know how to react. They didn't know what they were dealing with. And Emily? Emily stood there, calm as ever, her heart still racing. She had no idea what was going to happen next. She couldn't see what was going on, but she felt the tension in the air. She knew that Max was in control, and that was enough for her. Days passed. One day turned into the next, and Emily kept doing what she always did. Every morning, she walked down the same street, her cane tapping the pavement with a soft rhythm. Max, her faithful guide dog, walked beside her, leading her safely down the road. It was part of their routine. It had always been part of their routine. But the bikers didn't care about routines. They didn't care about Emily's life or what she had been through. They were loud. They were rude. And they made sure that Emily knew they were there. Every day, without fail, they harassed her. They shouted rude comments. They laughed. They revved their motorcycles near her, too close for comfort. Emily tried to ignore them, just like she had done so many times before. But each time, it felt harder and harder. It felt like the bikers were always watching her, waiting for her to show weakness. Emily could hear them before she even saw them. The sound of their loud motorcycles roaring down the street was enough to make her heart race. She had learned how to stay calm, though. She knew that reacting could make things worse. So, each day, she just kept walking, trusting Max to guide her. But Max? Max wasn't going to let it go forever. Max wasn't like the bikers. Max was smart. He was trained to protect. He knew how to handle danger. He had been through a lot in his life, and he wasn't about to let anyone mess with Emily. Over the next few days, Emily started to notice something strange. Max's behavior was changing. At first, it was small things that only someone who knew him as well as Emily would notice. But Emily was paying attention. She knew Max better than anyone. She could sense the shift in him. She could feel it in the way he walked, in the way he held his head. Max was becoming more and more alert every time they passed the bikers. At first, Emily didn't say anything. She didn't want to make it a bigger deal than it already was. She just kept going on with her daily routine. But the bikers were getting bolder. They were getting more and more aggressive. They would rev their engines even closer to her, making the ground rumble beneath her feet. Emily could feel the vibrations through her shoes, and she knew it was making Max tense up. One afternoon, it all changed. Emily was walking down the street like she always did, her cane tapping softly with each step. Max was walking beside her, as calm and steady as ever. But Emily could feel a difference. Max wasn't relaxed. She could tell by the way he was walking, by the way his body was stiff and ready. She knew something was going to happen. As they approached the corner, Emily heard the familiar roar of the motorcycles. She braced herself, already preparing for the usual teasing, the jokes, the jeers. But today, something was different. Max's ears stood tall. They were alert. His body was tense. He was watching the bikers, his eyes locked on them, ready to act. Emily felt the shift, too. She didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but she could feel it in the air. Max was ready for something. Emily took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She had learned not to let her nerves take control. But the bikers were getting closer. She could hear the loud engines getting nearer, and she knew this time, things weren't going to be the same. One of the bikers, a tall man with a dark beard and tattoos covering his arms, noticed them first. He smirked, revving his engine and speeding up to get closer to Emily. "What's the blind lady doing here, huh?" he called out. "Think you're special, lady, because of that fancy dog?" His voice was full of mockery. Max growled, low and steady. The sound made the biker stop in his tracks. He had been so focused on teasing Emily that he hadn't noticed the warning signs from Max. But now, he was getting the message loud and clear. Max was not happy. The other bikers saw what was happening and slowed down, watching in silence. They knew that something was different. They had seen Emily and Max every day, but they had never seen Max act like this before. He wasn't the friendly, calm guide dog they were used to. Today, Max was showing them something new. Max's growl grew louder. His muscles were tense, and his body was poised for action. Emily could feel the change in him. She knew that Max was about to do something. But what? The biker who had spoken first looked down at Max, a little surprised. He didn't know what to make of this. Was this dog really a threat? The man had seen many dogs before, but none like Max. None with the kind of intense gaze that Max had. None with the kind of power that Max carried in every movement. For a second, the biker hesitated. His confidence started to waver, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to keep pushing Emily and Max. But then, the other bikers started laughing again, egging him on. "Come on, don't be scared of a dog," one of them shouted. "Let's show the lady who's boss." But Max wasn't backing down. He stood tall beside Emily, his growl getting louder and louder. Emily knew that Max was ready to protect her if he had to. She didn't want to make things worse, but she also knew she couldn't just let the bikers keep pushing her around. Not anymore. The biker who had been closest to Emily took another step toward her, thinking that Max wouldn't do anything. But he was wrong. Max sprang into action. With a sudden movement, he lunged forward, standing between Emily and the biker. His teeth were bared, his growl deep and menacing. The biker stopped, his eyes wide. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Max to fight back. He stepped back, unsure of what to do next. The other bikers watched in silence, unsure of how to react. Emily could hear the fear in their voices as they slowly started to back off. "What's wrong with you guys? She's just a blind woman." "You're scared of a dog," one of the bikers muttered under his breath. But Max didn't care. He wasn't afraid of them. He wasn't scared of anyone. He was only focused on one thing: protecting Emily. Emily, feeling the tension in the air, reached down and gently petted Max's head. She knew he had done his job. He had shown the bikers that they weren't dealing with an easy target. They had underestimated Max, just like they had underestimated her. But Max wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. The bikers, realizing they had pushed things too far, started their engines and slowly backed away. They had learned their lesson the hard way. Max stood tall, his head held high. Emily couldn't see it, but she could feel the pride in his posture. He had protected her, just like he had always promised to do. As the bikers disappeared down the road, Emily took a deep breath, feeling her heart slow down. It had been a close call, but she knew that Max had her back. Max had always been there for her. And today, he had proven just how strong, how brave, he really was. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden glow over the street as Emily and Max made their way down the familiar path. But today, things felt different. The bikers were back. Their loud motorcycles rumbled in the distance, and Emily could already hear the sound of their engines growing closer. Max's ears perked up, and his muscles tensed. He knew what was coming. The bikers had been harassing Emily for days now. They thought she was weak. They thought she was just a blind woman with a dog to help her. They didn't know the truth about Emily, and they definitely didn't know the truth about Max. They thought they could keep pushing her around. But today was different. Today, Max was ready. The sound of the motorcycles grew louder. Emily tightened her grip on her cane, trying to stay calm. She had faced them before. She had walked past them countless times without flinching, but today, she wasn't just walking. She was prepared for whatever was about to happen. She could feel the tension in the air, and she knew Max felt it too. The bikers circled around Emily and Max, revving their engines to show off. Their bikes growled like angry beasts, and the ground shook beneath their feet. They surrounded her, trying to block her path, laughing and shouting rude things. "Hey, what's the blind lady doing here, huh?" one of the bikers shouted, his voice full of mockery. "Think she's special because of her fancy dog?" Emily didn't respond. She kept her head high and her eyes straight ahead. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her scared. She knew Max was there, and that was all that mattered. But this time, it was different. Max could sense something in the air. He was calm, but his body was tense. His paws were planted firmly on the ground, his tail held straight, and his eyes were locked on the bikers. He was watching them carefully, studying them, waiting for the right moment to act. As one of the bikers leaned in closer, a big grin on his face, he didn't notice Max's body shift from calm to fierce. Max's ears stood up straight, and his muscles tensed as if he were coiled, ready to spring. The biker, still laughing, didn't even notice the warning signs. "Don't get too close to her, buddy," another biker warned, laughing like Emily couldn't hear. He thought it was funny. He thought they had all the power. But Max wasn't laughing. He was not going to let them make fun of Emily any longer. He wasn't just a dog. He was so much more than that. Before anyone could blink, Max lunged forward with a speed and power that surprised even the bikers. The biker who had gotten too close barely had time to react. Max's deep, warning growl echoed in the air, so fierce that it sent the man stumbling back. His face, which had been full of laughter just moments before, suddenly changed to one of shock and fear. The biker's eyes widened as he realized that the dog wasn't just barking to scare him. Max was protecting his handler. Max's growl filled the air, strong and commanding. It was clear that the bikers had crossed a line. This was no longer a joke. This was no longer funny. This was a warning. The bikers stopped laughing. They froze, unsure of what to do next. They had never seen a dog act like this before. They had no idea what Max was capable of. But Max wasn't finished yet. With a grace and precision that could only come from years of specialized training, Max dropped into a military stance. His body was still, but his eyes never left the bikers. He stood tall, proud, and ready. His muscles rippled under his golden fur, and the air seemed to crackle with the power he was holding back. Emily could feel the change in Max. She could sense the strength in him. It was like he was no longer just her guide dog. He was a protector. A warrior. And in that moment, Emily knew that the bikers were not going to get away with harassing her. Not today. Not ever again. Emily took a deep breath and straightened her back. She was calm, but there was a strength in her voice that could not be ignored. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to yell. Her voice was firm, and it carried through the air with authority. "You need to leave her alone," Emily said, her voice sharp and commanding. The words were simple, but they were enough. She didn't have to say more. The bikers could feel the power in her words, just as they could feel the power in Max's stance. The bikers didn't know what to do. They had seen the woman walk by before, but they had never seen her like this. They had underestimated her. They thought she was weak because she was blind. They thought she was just a helpless woman with a guide dog. But they were wrong. They didn't realize who they were messing with. Emily paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. The bikers were still, frozen in shock. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected Emily to stand up for herself. And they definitely hadn't expected Max to be so powerful. Emily took a step forward, her cane tapping the ground with each movement, her posture straight and confident. She turned her head slightly toward Max, and without a single word, he shifted his position, walking alongside her in perfect sync. Then, in the most calm and matter-of-fact tone, Emily spoke again. "Max is no ordinary dog," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "He's a retired Navy SEAL K-9. Trained to protect, to defend, and to serve." The words hit the bikers like a ton of bricks. They had no idea. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Max wasn't just a guide dog. He wasn't just a sweet, loyal companion. He was trained for combat. He had served in the military. And he was ready to protect his handler with everything he had. The bikers stood there, wide-eyed and speechless. The reality of the situation hit them hard. They had picked on the wrong person. They had picked on the wrong dog. Max wasn't just any dog. He was a trained warrior, and they had underestimated him. Emily didn't wait for their reaction. She didn't need to. She knew they were already thinking twice about their actions. They could see that they were no longer in control. Max had taken that away from them in an instant. Emily took another step forward, her cane tapping the pavement with a soft, steady rhythm. Max stayed close by her side, his eyes scanning the bikers as they slowly backed away. He was still alert, ready to move if they made any more wrong moves. The bikers, realizing they had no chance against Max, turned their motorcycles around. They revved their engines one last time, but the sound was different now. It wasn't the roar of power they had once had. It was the sound of retreat. They didn't say another word. They didn't mock her. They didn't laugh. They just left. As the bikers disappeared down the road, Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. She knew she had just won. Not with words, but with strength. Not because of what she could see, but because of who she had beside her, Max, her protector, her warrior. "Good boy," Emily whispered, smiling softly as she patted Max's head. He had done his job. He had protected her. He had made sure she was safe. And in doing so, he had shown the bikers and everyone else that they would never be able to take advantage of her again. The bikers, still reeling from the surprise of the last few moments, slowly started to back away. Their faces, once filled with confidence and laughter, were now full of shock and fear. They had thought they could easily scare Emily, thinking she was just a vulnerable woman walking with her guide dog. They hadn't expected her to stand up for herself, and they definitely hadn't expected Max. As they slowly retreated, the bikers threw a few nervous glances back at Emily and Max. They revved their engines, but it wasn't with the same confidence they had had before. The roar of their motorcycles now sounded weak and unsure, like they were just trying to get away from the situation as quickly as possible. Emily didn't move. She stood there, calm and steady, her cane tapping once in a while on the ground. Max, by her side, still stood tall, his body ready for anything. His eyes never left the bikers as they made their way down the street, each one of them too scared to even look her way anymore. One of the bikers, the one who had been the loudest, looked back over his shoulder and shook his head. "This ain't over," he muttered, but his voice didn't have the same strength as before. The fear in his voice was clear. Max's warning growl still echoed in their ears, and they knew that they had made a huge mistake. Emily stood tall, her chin raised slightly. She wasn't proud of what had just happened, but she felt something inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt strong. She felt powerful. She knew she had just taught the bikers a lesson they would never forget. As the last of the bikers disappeared down the street, the sound of their engines faded away. Silence fell over the sidewalk. Emily and Max stood there, alone, but not for long. People who had been watching from the safety of their windows, cars, and shops started to come out. They had witnessed everything that had just happened. They had seen the bikers circle around Emily and Max, trying to intimidate them. They had seen the moment when Max had stepped forward and showed them who he really was. They had seen the power and strength that lay beneath Emily's calm exterior. Now, they were looking at her differently. Before, they had only seen a blind woman walking down the street with her guide dog. Now, they saw someone else. They saw someone who was strong, who was brave, and who had the power to stand up for herself no matter what. A woman, a mother of two, came over first. She had watched the whole thing from her window, and now, with a smile on her face, she approached Emily and Max. "That was amazing," she said, her voice full of admiration. "You and your dog, he's incredible. What a team you two make." She crouched down to give Max a gentle pat on the head, and he wagged his tail, clearly enjoying the attention. "Thank you," Emily said, her voice soft but steady. "Max is a very special dog. He's been trained to protect, and I trust him with my life." The woman smiled. "I can see that. You're not just any woman walking down the street. You're a force to be reckoned with. Those bikers will never bother you again." Emily didn't smile back, but she nodded, grateful for the compliment. She didn't need praise or admiration. She just needed people to understand that she was more than they thought she was. And today, she had shown them just that. Soon, more people came over. A man in a business suit shook his head as he walked past. "I can't believe those guys tried to pick on you," he said, looking at Emily with respect. "It's good to know there are still people out there who will stand up for what's right. And good dogs, too." He chuckled, scratching Max's head before walking on. A few kids from a nearby school, who had been walking home when the whole thing happened, came up to Emily. They looked at her with wide eyes, clearly amazed by what they had just seen. "Wow, you and your dog are so cool," one of them said. "Are you a superhero or something?" Emily couldn't help but smile this time. "No, I'm not a superhero," she said with a light laugh. "But I guess you could say I have a pretty powerful friend." She gave Max a pat on the head, and the kids all giggled, now looking at the golden retriever with new admiration. As more people came over, Emily felt a warmth in her chest. The crowd wasn't just looking at her with pity anymore. They were looking at her with respect. They saw her as strong, brave, and capable. And that meant more to her than anything else. But what was even more powerful was the fact that she had stood up for herself and for Max. She had shown those bikers that they couldn't bully her, no matter how loud or scary they were. She had proven that it wasn't about what others thought of her. It was about who she was inside, and the strength she carried with her, no matter the challenges. As she started to walk again, the crowd slowly began to disperse, but the eyes that followed her were different now. They didn't just see a woman with a cane and a dog. They saw someone who had earned their respect. Someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. And someone who had a loyal companion who would always have her back. As Emily continued down the street, Max at her side, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that she had never felt before. She wasn't just walking to her destination. She was walking with a new sense of power. She had shown the world, and most importantly, herself, that she was more than what others saw. She was strong. She was capable. And she wasn't afraid to stand up for herself, no matter what. And Max? He stayed close by, his eyes always scanning the surroundings, making sure they were safe. He had done his job. He had protected Emily when she needed it most. And now, as they walked together, the bond between them felt stronger than ever before. The bikers had learned a valuable lesson that day, but so had Emily. She had learned that sometimes, standing up for yourself can change everything. It doesn't matter if others think you're weak or incapable. What matters is the strength you find within yourself and the support you have from those who care about you. And, with Max by her side, Emily knew she was never truly alone. From that day on, Emily didn't just walk down the street. She walked with her head held high, knowing that no one could ever underestimate her again. Sometimes, the most underestimated people in the room carry the most power. You never know who you're messing with until they show you. And next time you judge someone, remember, appearances can be deceiving. After that day, something inside Emily shifted. She didn't just walk down the street anymore. She walked with purpose. With confidence. With a quiet strength that had always been there, but was now visible for everyone to see. Max, by her side, was a constant reminder of what she had learned. And more importantly, of what others had learned about her. It was funny, really. Before, people had seen her blindness and her cane and assumed she was weak. They thought she needed help. They thought she was just like everyone else who couldn't see. But they had been wrong. They didn't know about the battles Emily had faced in her life. They didn't know that she had learned to rely on her own strength long before this moment. And now, they knew. They knew that Emily wasn't someone to be underestimated. And they also knew that if they thought they could push her around, they were sorely mistaken. But Emily wasn't angry. She wasn't looking for revenge. She wasn't trying to make people feel bad about themselves. Instead, she felt a quiet pride that grew stronger each time someone came up to her and thanked her for showing them what true strength looked like. Max, her ever-faithful guide dog, had been the one to alert the world to her power. His training had prepared him for moments like this. But it wasn't just his training that made the difference. It was the bond between Emily and Max. They had a connection that went deeper than just handler and guide dog. They had been through so much together, and Max understood Emily's needs without her even having to say a word. Max wasn't just any dog. He was a retired Navy SEAL K9. A dog who had been trained to do things that most people couldn't even imagine. He had served his country, and now he served Emily. But there was something more to him than just his training. He was loyal. He was protective. And he was Emily's friend. He knew that his job wasn't just to help her get from one place to another. His job was to keep her safe. To make sure she was okay. And in that moment, Max did exactly that. But the lesson wasn't just for the bikers. It was for everyone who had ever thought someone like Emily, someone like her, was weak or incapable of standing up for themselves. People had assumed that Emily was helpless. They thought she couldn't do much. They thought she couldn't protect herself. They thought she needed someone else to do the hard things for her. But they were wrong. And Emily had shown them that. She had shown them that strength doesn't come from what you can see on the outside. It doesn't come from how tall you are, how strong your muscles are, or what others think of you. True strength comes from within. It comes from the courage to face challenges head-on, no matter how difficult they might seem. It comes from the ability to rise above the opinions of others and show them that you are capable of more than they will ever know. When Emily stood up to those bikers, she wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for everyone who had ever been overlooked. For everyone who had been judged by the way they looked or by what people assumed about them. She was showing the world that appearances can be deceiving. That you can't always tell who someone is or what they can do by looking at them. You have to take the time to get to know them. You have to look deeper. And that's exactly what the bikers hadn't done. They had seen Emily with her cane and her guide dog, and they had assumed she was weak. They hadn't taken the time to see her for who she truly was. They hadn't realized that Emily had been through a lot in her life. They didn't know that she had faced many challenges and had never given up. They didn't know that Emily was a fighter. But now, they did. Emily had proven that strength doesn't always show on the outside. That even the quietest person in the room can be the strongest one. And that the person you least expect might just be the one to surprise you when you least expect it. And that's a lesson the bikers would never forget. As Emily walked away from that moment, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The message had been sent loud and clear. And from that day on, she knew that no one would ever see her as just the blind woman with the guide dog again. People would see her as someone who had earned their respect. Someone who had shown them that the true measure of a person isn't how they look, but what they're made of. The crowd that had gathered around her that day didn't just see a woman with a cane. They saw someone who had stood up for herself. They saw someone who had shown them that appearances can be deceiving. And they saw someone who, with the help of her loyal dog, had proven that there's more to every person than meets the eye. Emily smiled softly to herself. She had never needed others' approval. But it felt good to know that, at least for one day, she had shown them what she was really capable of. She had shown them that she wasn't someone to be underestimated. And that was all that mattered. And so, as she continued walking down the street with Max by her side, she carried with her the knowledge that no one could ever judge her the same way again. Because she knew her worth. She knew her strength. And most importantly, she knew that appearances can always be deceiving.